Well, welcome everyone to the One Pair States meeting tonight. I wanted to talk a little bit about the One Pair States Communication Work Group, how we got started, and what we learned. We were inspired by a One Pair States call with Wendell Potter, Ken Frisoff, Chuck Pinocchio, Bill Semple, Julian Palmer, and myself began email and conference call meetings February 22nd of 2018. Several more people joined the work group over time. We started with the premise that no one had done in-depth value-based social marketing research to learn how the public feels and what they think about our current fragmented healthcare system. We proposed a multifaceted effort to understand what Americans feel and think about healthcare and to identify best messages and narratives to motivate Americans to support universal, publicly funded, privately delivered healthcare. We prepared vision and value statements, a request for proposals, an opposition inoculation document, bios of the work group members, a list of potential funders, communication research letter, and a list of audiences we wanted to reach. We tried to raise money to pay for the research, but we were unable to raise enough money. Without our knowledge, a parallel process occurred. Families USA hired Drew Weston to do the needed research. Here is what we learned. When it comes to talking about health policy, we have made some mistakes. We have been making appeals to intellect, not values. We assumed that if we just explain policies better, Americans would respond. But human brains are not organized to connect initially using their intellect. Research shows that if we do not first reach people with shared values, we won't reach them at all. We learned that most Americans believe everyone should have access to healthcare. We all deserve the same quality of healthcare. Everyone should have a family doctor. Too many people have been shut out due to cost, coverage, and color. And our leaders should come together and finally fix the problem once and for all. We learned that some messages resonate with strong Democrats. Some messages resonate with strong Republicans. Some messages resonate with persuadable voters. And we will not be successful if we are only talking to ourselves. We learned that what people know about healthcare policy affects maybe 1% of their support. It's the values they care about that drive them to support or oppose policies. Therefore, we need to underpin messages with shared values, values that are shared by both conservatives and liberals. We learned that these are values that we share. Not only conservatives, but liberals believe in patriotism, the importance of family, hard work, tribalism, and sanctity. We also share the following values: loyalty, personal responsibility, simplicity, security, prudence, and preventing waste. We learn to raise concerns about what's wrong and to finish our presentations with the solution, how to reform our payment system. We learn that messages should be inclusive. We should use us and our, not them and they. You and your are engaging. We need to make the message local if possible. And we need to acknowledge people's fears of losing what they already have. And we need to learn to tell stories. We need to learn to adapt the message to our audience, to send a messenger who can connect with the audience, someone they are more likely to trust. We need to adapt the format to reach different groups. Twitter, Facebook, speeches, press releases, letters to the editor, podcasts are all methods of reaching different groups. And we learned that we need to keep repeating positive, good messages. People need to hear the message several times before it sinks in. And we need to not let the opposition control the narrative. Don't use the opposition's hot button words like socialism. So here are some examples from one slideshow. There are many, many examples, but these will give you a taste of how we adapted some of our materials to incorporate some of the ideas that we learned in these 3.5 years of meeting and reading, and from the Family USA Drew Weston research. In this slide, we talk about the way you pay for healthcare now and the new way to pay for healthcare in the future. Notice that we use the word you, the way you pay for healthcare, not they or them. And we ask a question, are you being ripped off? And the method of using a question rather than telling people what they should think pulls people in more effectively, and helps them to begin to think about the question. Then this is a story, because we learned that telling stories is highly effective. It's much easier for people to learn concepts when we tell stories. This is a story about my neighbor who lives in the mountains with me in Colorado. Leonard belongs to an electricians union. He worked hard all his life. He thought he had an excellent health insurance plan. He thought if he needed health care, he could afford to pay 20% of the cost, since the plan would cover 80%. But he didn't know his multiple back surgeries and surgery for a traumatic brain injury after a car accident, followed by several strokes, would cost over $2.5 million. And 20% of $2.5 million would mean Leonard personally would pay $500,000. He had to refinance his home more than once. He had hoped to have no long-term debt after he retired, but instead, he and his wife had another very big debt to pay. We can do better for Leonard, and we can do better for your family. So in this story, it helps people to feel like this could happen to them. Stories, when they are told correctly to make a point, engage people because they trigger emotions, like the sadness of Leonard's story about how many healthcare problems he had. And on top of that, all of the debt that he has to pay by refinancing his home more than once. He also, in this story, is highlighted as someone who worked hard all his life. And we know that that's a shared value between conservatives and progressives. And so building that into the story was an important way of underpinning the story with a shared value. Then in this next slide, we talk about creating a Colorado-owned healthcare plan. The purpose in this slide is to point out the meaning of tribalism, meaning that you all belong to the tribe of people who live in Colorado, and that gives you a sense of belonging that is a shared value. And in the slide, we talk about a way for your family to have healthcare security, because security is another key value that both conservatives and liberals care about. In this slide, we talk about what is wrong with your current commercial health insurance plan and point out you are not guaranteed comprehensive health care coverage for the rest of your life without an increase in premiums, copays, or deductibles. But our congressmen have that guarantee. Why don't all Americans have that? And the purpose of this is to point out the unfairness that our elected leaders who have the power to provide healthcare coverage for all of us have made sure that they have it for themselves, but not for all of us. In the studies that have been done about messages that resonate with persuadable voters, conservatives, and liberals, this is the slide that was their most favorite message that resonates the most with the American public, no matter what your political persuasion is. People are highly engaged with this particular message. And it talks about you and your. It is not about some other person that doesn't have health insurance. It's about all of us. And so it is engaging in that regard as well. And then this next slide is called the Colorado Solution, our own Colorado plan, publicly funded, privately delivered, excellent healthcare. You and I would pay less in taxes than we would pay if we continue to rely on profit-first commercial health insurance companies, because we would eliminate unnecessary administrative costs. The underlying value that is stated indirectly is that we are wasting money, and that is a underlying value that both conservatives and liberals share, that we believe that it's important to prevent waste. The next slide is why get involved. You need to take responsibility and connect a healthcare system that is failing you and your family. So again, we're talking about you and your. We're talking about family, which is a highly important shared value between conservatives and progressives. And we are talking about another underpinned value called personal responsibility. Sometimes Republicans like to hijack that particular value, but the truth is that both liberals and conservatives believe in the importance of personal responsibility. So we're in this slide trying to suggest to them that you need to take personal responsibility for the kind of health insurance you have. And right now, the kind of health insurance you have is ripping you off, and it's not fair to your family. And you need to think about a better way to finance healthcare for your own family. Then the next slide is about getting involved by promoting healthcare as a public resource, like public schools, libraries, roads, and fire departments. The subtle, unstated message here is that there are ways that we share costs with one another that some people would call socialism and label it as something negative, but many of us would not think that a public library was negative, or the roads we drive on were negative, or fire departments. And therefore, we need to look at healthcare like it was a public resource, just like we use these other resources to cover the needs of our community. And there are more examples of our work. Ken Krisoff has created USA Universal, Simple, and Affordable videos. Dr. AJ has created a series of videos that are underpinned with shared values. We're happy to share all of our work with anyone who wishes to incorporate our work into their presentations moving into the future. And we encourage all of you to create more messages and narratives, to test them out. Try your best to underpin them with shared values, and let the rest of us know what seems to be most effective with various audiences. If you have any questions or comments, I'd be happy to take those now. We're happy to share this particular series of slides with any of you. All you have to do is email me or call me, and I will share any of the information that we've prepared through the communications work group. Happy to take questions or comments now.